In this video, we will be going over Keith Donellan's article, Reference and Definite Descriptions. In this article, Donellan defends the thesis that definite descriptions can have two distinct types of uses. They can be used in the attributive sense or attributive way, and they can be used in the referential way. So one uses a definite description attributively if one, in using a definite description, wishes to say something essential about a particular person or a particular thing. So you say something along the lines of the so-and-so, where the so-and-so is supposed to be something that picks out an individual uniquely. An individual who uses a definite description referentially uses a definite description in order to pick out an individual regardless of whether or not the description being used actually fits the individual in question or is actually satisfied by the individual in question. So with the referential use, the primary task or the primary goal of using a definite description is to direct your audience's attention to the individual that you have in mind. Again, whether or not the individual picks out or has the features in question. So we can see that with the attributive use of definite descriptions, this is something that someone like Russell would actually agree with. And in fact, it seems to be the view that Russell subscribed to, that definite descriptions are used to say something essential about an individual. And they pick out an individual if that individual in question meets or satisfies the conditions of the definite description. But the more contentious claim that Donellan wants to argue is that definite descriptions don't just have that attributive use to them, but we can also use them referentially in this way, right? We can use them in such a way that we can pick out individuals with these definite descriptions, whether or not the individuals actually satisfy the conditions of the definite description. In order to demonstrate that definite descriptions do have these distinct types of uses, Donellan provides two illustrations to argue for this position. So the first one, in the first case, he has us consider the following. Suppose that there is an individual, Smith, who just got gruesomely murdered, and there's a speaker who utters the following sentence: Smith's murder is insane. Well, it seems that there is an attributive use to this sentence, or at least the description Smith's murder, in the following sense. Suppose that the speaker who utters this has no one particular in mind. He doesn't know who actually murders Smith, but he utters the sentence Smith's murder is insane because of the particular brutal manner in which Smith's body was found, or the way in which Smith was murdered. Well, in this case, because there's no one particularly in mind, the speaker seems to be using the description Smith's murder to try to say something essential about a particular person, namely the person who murdered Smith, and then attribute to them this other property of being insane in addition to that. Under Russell's account, the sentence would be true if there is one and only one individual who is Smith's murderer, and that individual in fact is insane. If, on the other hand, there isn't one or only one individual who is Smith's murderer and who isn't insane, obviously, then the sentence would turn out to be false. Perhaps the more interesting claim that Donellan is making is that this sentence can be used in the referential way, or at least, again, the description can be used referentially. He says, suppose that an individual named Jones has been charged with the murder of Smith. And now let's furthermore assume that Jones actually didn't murder Smith, so he was wrongfully accused of murdering Smith. Now let's say that the speaker utters the same sentence, Smith's murder is insane, having Jones in mind. Well, it seems that in this case, the speaker, when uttering the sentence, he's using the term Smith's murderer to refer to Jones, even though Jones doesn't fit the description, but he seems to be able to use the term correctly given the context that everybody is assuming that Jones was the one that's murdered Smith. So the reason why it appears that the definite description Smith's murder seems to have this referential use here is because it seems that the speaker is successful in picking out Jones specifically with this description, even though we already know that Jones didn't murder anyone, in that the speaker is successful in doing this. This is all that Donellan needs to demonstrate that, hey, the definite description Smith's murder can be used to successfully pick out an individual, even though that individual does not satisfy the conditions of the description itself. Hence, the definite description Smith's murder can be used in not only in this attributive way that we already saw from Russell, but also in this referential way. The second case that is used to highlight the distinction between the referential use and the attributive use is Donellan's famous martini case. So suppose that you are at a party and you see on one side of the room an interesting person holding a martini glass. So you ask the person next to you, who's the man over there drinking the martini glass? Well, let's suppose that the person who's holding the martini glass, the one you just pointed to or drew your friend's attention to, let's suppose that that person is not actually drinking any gin or vodka. That's usually what's in a martini with some vermouth, but instead is drinking water in the martini glass. It seems that even though the description, the man drinking the martini, doesn't pick out any individual, let's assume that no one else is drinking gin or vodka in the entire room, you are still successfully using the description, the man drinking a martini, in order to refer to someone specifically, right? And not just to refer to someone specifically, but in this case, to ask an answerable question, right? So there seems to be a coherent way in which you can be using the term or the definite description, the man drinking a martini glass, and also asking this question, even though the description does not pick out anyone specifically, because there is no one drinking actually gin or vodka. Now suppose that instead of you seeing an interesting individual drinking a martini or some liquid out of a martini glass, someone in the party mentions an individual, a man drinking a martini who's very interesting. And then later on in the party, you ask that person who mentioned that person, you ask them about the man drinking the martini. You say, who's the man drinking the martini again? Or something along those lines. Well, again, suppose that no one is actually drinking any gin or vodka. Well, in that case, it seems that your use is, since you don't have anybody particular in mind that you're thinking about, the description, the man drinking a martini, is not actually picking out anybody. So you're not successfully using it to specify an individual. In that case, it seems that now you are using the definite description, the man drinking a martini, not in a referential use because you haven't picked out anybody, but in an attributive use, right? And in this case, again, it doesn't actually successfully pick out anybody because there is no individual, say, at this party who is drinking gin or vodka. They're just drinking water. So now Donellan uses this distinction not only to establish the distinction, but also to bring up a point against Russell's view of definite descriptions. Recall that we've already mentioned that Russell seems to agree that definite descriptions have this attributive use. I mean, well, in fact, Russell, not that he just agrees on it, he only, according to Donellan, only recognized that definite descriptions had this attributive use. And another thing that follows from Russell's view is assuming that definite descriptions only have this attributive use, that would entail, or at least part of what Russell is suggesting, is that if you use a sentence of the, where you use a definite description and the definite description doesn't pick out anyone in particular because nothing satisfies the definite description. Say you use a definite description, the phi, and there's nothing that satisfies the phi, right? There is no phi. Well, then in that case, the sentence in question that has a definite description will turn out to be false, according to the Russellian view, according to Russell's view. But what Donellan seems to successfully demonstrate, if he is correct, is that, in fact, no, Russell's wrong about that, because definite descriptions also have this other type of use, or we can use them in this other type of way, the referential way. And if this is correct, then it seems that we can use definite descriptions in sentences to say something true, right, about individuals, even though there is nothing that satisfies the description in question. So even though the description doesn't pick out anyone in virtue of that person satisfying the descriptive content, right? We saw this in the case of Smith's murderer when we assumed that it was Jones, and we also saw it in the case of the individual asking about the individual drinking the martini, that he sees across the room. And he's actually not drinking any gin or vodka, so he's not drinking actual martini. He's just drinking water out of a martini glass. So in both of these cases, it seems that the definite descriptions in question have been successfully used to pick out individuals, not because they satisfy the description in question, and then we can actually ask or say something true or not about those individuals. So the takeaway is that yes, Russell is wrong, according to Donellan, that we can use definite descriptions to pick out individuals, even though they don't satisfy the definite description in question. And furthermore, that sentences that have definite descriptions, whose descriptions don't pick out anyone, can actually come out true under some analyses. So finally, after establishing his distinction between the attributive use of definite descriptions and the referential use of definite descriptions, there is one final distinction that Donellan wants to establish. He doesn't so much argue for it, but more kind of just stipulates it. But it seems to be a genuine distinction. So the distinction is between denotation and reference or referring. So far, especially with Russell, we were using the term denoting or referring synonymously, but Donellan wants to say that these are actually two types of things. So denoting or denotation is a property of linguistic expressions. So a definite description denotes an entity if that entity actually satisfies the description uniquely. However, referring is not a property of linguistic expressions. Referring is this relation that an individual enacts. So it's referring is a relation between a speaker and the thing that is being picked out by the speaker's intention. So denoting applies to linguistic expressions, whereas referring applies to individuals. Individuals refer, right? So we have individuals in mind, or people in mind, and we refer to those people. Whereas a denotation has to do with whether or not an entity out in the world satisfies the description uniquely, if they're picked out uniquely by a particular linguistic term. Again, denotation is a property of individuals, whereas referring is a property of people's intentions to pick out objects out in the world. So that concludes this video. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know.